On a mountain trail, my daughter-in-law and my sons suddenly shoved my husband and me off a cliff. As we lay there bleeding, I heard my husband whisper, "Don't move, pretend to be dead." When they finally walked away, he turned to me and revealed a truth far more horrifying than the fall itself. "You think you know your own children?" I thought I did, until just 3 days ago, when my son and daughter-in-law pushed my husband and me off a 90-foot cliff. As I lay there, broken and bleeding, my husband Henry whispered, "Hilda, don't move. Play dead." But that wasn't even the worst of it. The worst was the horrifying truth Henry revealed, a monstrous secret our children had hidden for 25 years. For 4 decades, Henry and I built what we thought was a perfect family. Our little suburban home smelled of fresh coffee and birdsong every morning. I was a teacher, coming home with stories of my students, while Henry, with his rough, delicate hands, crafted the most beautiful furniture you've ever seen in his carpentry shop. We had 2 sons, Richard, our firstborn, and Damien, 5 years younger. Richard was the light of our house, always laughing, always helping Henry, always shielding me from worries. Damien was quieter, more reserved, but I loved them both with equal intensity. As a mother, you never play favorites, right? Or so I always believed. Sundays, after church, we'd gather around the oak table Henry had carved. Richard would share his big plans for studying engineering, while Damien would just pick at his food, silent. Our life was simple, beautiful. In the evenings, Henry and I would walk the town trails, dreaming of retirement, of seeing the ocean, of watching our grandchildren grow. I never imagined those peaceful walks were training for the one that almost killed me. We were an unbreakable team, my Henry and I, building a future, planning to grow old together in that house. Perfect happiness, I would discover much later, often hides the deepest tragedies. Then, Richard turned 20, and everything changed. He started arguing with Damien about things I couldn't understand. I'd hear whispers, then silence when I appeared. Henry would wave it off, "Just brotherly stuff, it'll pass." I desperately wanted to believe him. I needed to believe my family was still perfect. One October night, exactly 25 years ago, Richard didn't come home for dinner. We waited, hour after agonizing hour. Damien was in his room, supposedly studying, but there was a strange, unsettling quiet in his eyes whenever I asked about his brother. Henry went out with the neighbors, searching every corner of town, every trail Richard frequented. At dawn, they found his body at the bottom of the river gorge. The police said it was an accident, that he'd stumbled in the dark. I never questioned it. I couldn't bear to imagine anything worse. Richard's funeral was the darkest day of my life. Damien was strangely calm, too calm, for someone who had just lost his older brother. While I cried until I had no tears left, he remained silent, his expression now, with what I know, sent shivers down my spine. Henry never left my side, holding me up, whispering comforts that I now realize must have tasted bitter in his mouth. After Richard's death, Damien changed completely. He became attentive, loving, as if trying to make amends. He helped with chores, accompanied Henry to the workshop, brought me things when he saw I was sad. I thought it was grief, his way of filling the void Richard left. How unbelievably naive I was. He was building a perfect mask to hide the monster within. Years passed. The wound never fully healed, but we learned to live with it. Damien married Melissa, a sweet girl from the next town. They seemed happy, had 2 beautiful children. I finally felt life was giving us a second chance at happiness. Melissa called me mom, helped with housework during visits. Damien inherited Henry's talent, started his own carpentry business. Everything seemed perfect again. But now, lying at the bottom of this gorge, ribs shattered, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, I understand. All that happiness was a carefully constructed lie. The first cracks appeared 6 months ago. Henry and I decided to update our will. We had saved our entire lives, the house, land from my parents, bank savings, almost $200,000 for our children and grandchildren. It was Damien who suggested we see the lawyer. "Mom, Dad, you're 60 now. It's important to have everything in order," he said, that smile now seeming sinister. Melissa nodded beside him, stroking my hand with fingers that would later push me to my death. "We love you so much, we want to make sure you're protected," she added, her voice sweet. How foolish I was to believe those words were genuine love. Our lawyer, old Albert, explained the options. Damien insisted on naming him and Melissa our sole heirs, arguing they'd handle that equitable distribution to the grandchildren. Besides, he'd said, "You're going to need us when you're older. It's better for us to have access to the resources to take care of you properly." Something in his tone made me uncomfortable, but Henry, always more trusting, agreed. I had my doubts. Richard had always talked about helping us financially when we got older. But Richard was gone. Damien was our only surviving child. We signed the papers that Tuesday. Melissa, in a pretty green dress, gave me a big hug. Now we're officially a united family forever, she whispered. A chill ran down my spine, though I didn't know why. Damien shook Henry's hand, his smile not reaching his eyes. That night, making dinner, I couldn't shake the terrible feeling I'd made a mistake. The following weeks were strange. Damien and Melissa visited more often, but their visits felt different. Not about family. They had suggestions, house improvements, investments, life insurance. Mom, you should think about selling this big house, Melissa said, eyeing our furniture. We could help you find a comfortable apartment. But I loved our house. Every corner held a memory. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals. Henry's workshop. The yard where our children and grandchildren played. I couldn't imagine life anywhere else. When I told them this, a flicker of irritation crossed Damien's eyes. It chilled me. Mom, you're being irrational, he snapped, a tone I'd never heard from him. This house is too big. If you fall, we won't be able to help in time. Melissa nodded vigorously. The upkeep costs a fortune. Sell now while the market is high. Henry started to consider their arguments. My practical husband even spoke of the logic behind their suggestions. But I couldn't shake the feeling there was something more. One night, after another tense conversation, I asked Henry if he didn't find Damien's sudden interest in our finances strange. Hilda, he replied, brushing his teeth, he just cares about us. Maybe we should consider it. We're not as young as we used to be. But I saw it in his eyes, a shadow of doubt he refused to acknowledge. Now I know Henry already had his suspicions. He was starting to connect dots I didn't even know existed. Things escalated. Damien suggested power of attorney over our finances. Just for precaution, he explained, Melissa preparing tea in our kitchen as if she owned the place. If one of you gets sick, we can manage without legal complications. He said it so naturally, so logically, it almost convinced me. But his insistence made me nervous. I couldn't sleep that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to Henry's breathing, trying to understand my unease. The next day, I called my sister Harriet. Harriet was sharper, more suspicious. After I told her about Damien's pressure, she was silent. Hilda, she finally said, doesn't it seem strange that Damien is so anxious to control your money? He has his own business. He's doing well. Why would he need so much control? Her words hit me like a slap. She was right. Damien had never shown financial problems before. That afternoon, when Damien came for another talk about our future, I confronted him. Son, I said, why is it so important for you to control our finances? Your father and I are still in our right minds. His reaction was immediate and telling. His face hardened. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes, cold, calculating, dangerous. Mom, it's not about control, he said, tense. It's about love, care, and family responsibility. But the way he said family responsibility sounded more like a threat. Melissa, quiet until then, intervened, her sweet voice firm. Hilda, we just want what's best for you. It's painful to see you worry about things we could easily handle. That night, after they left, Henry and I had our first serious argument in years. He thought I was paranoid. I insisted something was wrong. Henry, I said, washing dishes, do you remember Damien before Richard died? He was different, more distant, there was something about him that scared me. Henry stopped, looking at me intently. In his eyes, I saw recognition. Hilda, he whispered, there are things about Richard's death I never told you. My heart pounded. What about Richard's death? I asked, my voice trembling, though a part of me dreaded the answer. Henry sank into a kitchen chair, the same one where Richard had done homework, where Damien had always been silent. He ran his hands over his face, as if trying to erase 25 years of torment. The night Richard died, he began, his voice broken, Damien wasn't in his room studying. I saw him leave around 8. I followed him, something about his attitude worried me. He'd been strange those days, aggressive, resentful. Henry paused, staring at his hands as if the terrible truth was written there. I saw them arguing by the gorge, Hilda. I heard them screaming horrible things. My world spun. What were they arguing about? I whispered, even though I knew I didn't want to know. Henry looked up, tears in his eyes, tears he hadn't shed at his oldest son's funeral. About the inheritance, Hilda. Damien was furious because Richard, as the oldest, would inherit most of our assets. But there was something more, something about money Richard had found. What money? I asked, the ground vanishing beneath my feet. Henry sighed. 3 days before he died, Richard came to me in the workshop. He discovered Damien stealing money from our savings account. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. Richard had proof. He'd been investigating for months. My mind refused to process it. My youngest son, so attentive after Richard's death, had been stealing from us since before his brother died. Why didn't you ever tell me? I accused Henry, feeling betrayal multiply. Because when I got to the gorge that night, it was already too late, he choked out. I saw Damien standing next to Richard's body. Our youngest son was trembling, crying, repeating, "It was an accident. It was an accident." He looked at me with those desperate eyes and begged me to help him. "Dad," he said, "Richard tripped when he was trying to hit me. I just defended myself, and he lost his balance." Tears streamed down my cheeks. "But you believed him," I murmured, though I knew the answer. Henry nodded slowly, guilt etching his face. He was my son, Hilda. My youngest son was asking for help, and Richard was already dead. I couldn't bring one back to life by destroying the other. I thought it was an accident. That Damien had learned his lesson. That he would become a better man. And the stolen money? I asked, needing every detail of this nightmare. Damien promised he'd pay it back little by little, that he'd taken it to invest in a business that went wrong. He swore he'd never do it again. And I believed him, Hilda, God forgive me. But I believed him because I needed to believe my son wasn't a killer. I stumbled from the table, holding onto the wall. Everything I believed about my family, about my surviving son, about the last 25 years, was a lie. Did he pay the money back? I asked, already knowing the answer from Henry's face. Never, he replied. In fact, he kept stealing small amounts. I pretended not to notice. Because confronting him would mean admitting I'd covered up a murder. I became his accomplice, Hilda. Every time I stayed silent, every time I pretended not to see the bank accounts dwindle, I became more of his accomplice. The horrible reality took shape in my mind. That's why he's so interested in controlling our finances now, I murmured. It's not because he cares about us. It's because he wants to finish what he started 25 years ago. Henry nodded gravely. And there's something else, Hilda. Something I just discovered a few weeks ago. What else could there be? I asked, my heart unable to take any more. Henry pulled papers from his desk. I've been discreetly investigating Damien's finances. His carpentry business isn't doing as well as he wants us to believe. He's on the verge of bankruptcy. He owes over $100,000 to banks and suppliers. The papers trembled in my hands. Damien wasn't the successful man he pretended to be. He was a desperate failure, living on lies and stolen money for decades. Does Melissa know? I asked, remembering her sweet smile. I'm sure she does, Henry replied. I've noticed how she directs the conversations about our money. How she asks specific questions about our savings, the house value, our life insurance. They aren't innocent questions, Hilda. They are questions from someone calculating exactly how much our death is worth. That sentence chilled me to the bone. Our death, I whispered. It was the first time I considered Damien might want to physically harm us. Until then, I thought he just wanted to rob or cheat us. But if he'd killed his own brother for money, what would stop him from killing his parents for the same reason? Henry, I said, grabbing his hands, we have to go to the police. Tell them the truth about Richard, and about what's happening now. But Henry shook his head, a hopelessness in his eyes that broke my heart. With what evidence, Hilda? I'm an accomplice to covering up a murder. If I talk now, I'll go to jail, too. And who's going to believe an old man of 65 who's kept this secret for 25 years? He was right. Do we just wait for him to kill us like he killed Richard? We're going to be very careful, Henry said, trying to sound confident. We're going to find a way to protect ourselves, to gather evidence. His words were interrupted by the phone. It was Damien. Hi, Mom, he said, his sweet voice now sinister. Melissa and I were thinking it would be beautiful to celebrate your 40th wedding anniversary with something special. How about we take you to those mountains you've always talked about next weekend? We could go on a family hike, take pictures, have a perfect day together. My blood turned to ice. I looked at Henry. He'd heard. The same terror was on his face. That's a very sweet idea, son, I managed, my voice trembling. But let us think about it. We'll get back to you tomorrow. After hanging up, we looked at each other in silence. We had just received an invitation to our own execution. The mountains, I murmured. He's going to take us to the mountains to kill us and make it look like an accident. Henry nodded gravely. Just like he did with Richard at the gorge. That night, we didn't sleep a minute, holding each other, planning how to save ourselves from our own son. The next few days were a nightmare of terror and pretense. Henry and I had to act normal when Damien and Melissa visited. We smiled when they talked about the mountain trip, nodded enthusiastically. But inside, every fiber of my being screamed with fear. I knew I was looking into the eyes of my oldest son's murderers, and now they planned to do the same to me and my husband. Melissa arrived Wednesday with a shopping bag, that radiant smile now a demon's grimace. "Hilda, dear," she said, hugging me with arms that would soon push me to my death. "I bought some supplies for our mountain adventure. Cookies, water, fruit, everything for the picnic." She showed me the bag like an excited child. But I could only think how each item could cover up our murder. "I also brought my new camera," she added, pulling out an expensive digital camera. "I want to capture every moment. These photos, we'll treasure them forever." The irony made me sick. The only photo she'd take would be of our broken bodies at the bottom of some cliff, if anyone ever found us. Damien appeared behind her, carrying a new hiking backpack. "Dad," he said to Henry with feigned enthusiasm. "I bought all the necessary equipment for a safe hike. Ropes, harnesses, lanterns, a first aid kit." Every word sounded like cruel mockery. Safety equipment to plan our murders. The perversity made me dizzy. "Isn't it a bit dangerous for people our age?" I asked, trying to sound casual, looking for an excuse to cancel. Melissa stroked my cheek with false tenderness. "That's why we chose a very easy, safe trail," she assured me. "Even kids can do it. Plus, Damien and I will be there to take care of you the whole time." Yes, they would take care of us until the exact moment they decided to push us off a cliff. That night, after they finally left, Henry and I sat trembling, not just from the cold, but from the absolute terror we'd held back for hours. "We can't go," I said, grabbing his hands. "We just can't." "If we don't go," Henry replied gravely, "they'll find another way to kill us. Maybe something even more accidental, like a house fire or a robbery gone wrong. At least in the mountains, we know what they're going to try to do." His words had a terrible logic, but brought no comfort. "So, what do you suggest?" I asked, desperate. Henry thought for a few minutes. "We're going to go, but we're going to be prepared. I'm going to hide my cell phone and set it to record everything. If we manage to survive, we'll have evidence. And if we don't..." His voice broke, "at least someone will know the truth." Friday night, we could barely touch dinner. We knew it might be our last meal together in our house, in that kitchen where we'd shared so many happy moments when we were a real family. Henry reviewed his will one more time, ensuring that if something happened, Damien wouldn't get everything without some record of our suspicions. "I wrote a letter," he confessed, pulling a sealed envelope from his desk. "It's addressed to your sister Harriet. It explains everything we know about Richard's death, and what we believe Damien plans to do to us. I hid it where we keep our important documents. If we don't return, at least you'll know where to find the truth." That night, we went to bed, holding each other, whispering words of love that could be our last. "If something happens to me," Henry said, "I want you to know that these 40 years with you have been the best of my life. Despite everything, despite the mistakes and the secrets, I love you more than my own life." I cried in silence, memorizing the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his body, the smell of his skin. Saturday dawned with a clear sky that seemed to mock our situation. Damien arrived early, whistling a cheerful tune that chilled my blood. "Morning, lovebirds," he called. "Ready for your big adventure?" Melissa appeared behind him, radiant as a bride on her wedding day. Except this was a wedding with death. During breakfast, which we barely ate, Damien explained the route. "It's a beautiful trail," he said, spreading a map. "It leads to a lookout where you can see the whole valley. They say the views are spectacular." His eyes shone with a demonic enthusiasm. Of course, the views would be spectacular. They would be the last we would see. "The trail has some steep parts," Melissa added, "but nothing experienced hikers like you can't handle." Her comment about our hiking abilities was a cruel joke. We were two 60-year-olds who barely walked through the park. As we loaded the car, I saw Damien meticulously checking his backpack. Ropes, a small shovel, and something that looked like a flare gun. "What's that for?" I asked, pointing. "For safety," he replied, without missing a beat. "If we get lost, we can send a distress signal." Of course. They'd send a distress signal after pushing us off a cliff so our bodies would be found, confirming a tragic accident. Everything was calculated. Every detail planned to make our murders look perfectly natural. The 2-hour car ride felt like an eternity. Melissa played cheerful music, singing along. Damien drove carefully, obeying every speed limit. He didn't want an accident to ruin his perfect plans. During the trip, Henry discreetly took my hand and activated the recording on his phone. Everything from that moment on would be recorded. If we survived, we'd have proof. If not, at least the truth wouldn't die with us. At the trailhead, my heart pounded. The place was beautiful, tall trees, the sound of a river. But for me, it was the setting for my execution. Damien and Melissa took their backpacks, smiling and joking as if it were the happiest day of their lives. Ready for the adventure? Damien asked. And for the first time in 25 years, I saw the same cold glint in his eyes he'd had the night he killed his brother. The trail started easy. Melissa walked ahead, taking pictures, commenting on wildflowers and birds. Her performance was perfect, a loving daughter-in-law enjoying a special day. Damien walked behind us, supposedly making sure we didn't fall behind. But I felt his eyes on our backs like daggers. Every time I turned, he smiled that perfected grin. "How are you doing, Mom and Dad?" he'd ask with fake concern. "Need to stop and rest." After an hour, we hit a steeper section. My legs felt heavy. Henry breathed with difficulty. We weren't used to this. Our murderous children knew. They chose a route to exhaust us, making us vulnerable. "We're almost at the lookout," Melissa announced, though the map showed we had another hour. Her lie confirmed they had no intention of reaching the real lookout. The place they planned to kill us must be much closer. During the hike, I memorized every detail, every tree, every rock, a reference if I survived to explain to the police. Henry did the same. We exchanged glances, loaded with terror and determination. We were walking toward our deaths, but it was our only chance for evidence. "Oh, look at that!" Melissa suddenly shouted, pointing to a rock formation. "That cliff has an incredible view. Why don't we climb up there for some special photos?" My blood ran cold. There it was. The place they'd chosen. The cliff rose about 90 feet, accessible by a much more dangerous secondary path. Loose rocks, fewer trees to grab. And from the top, a precipice falling into a deep gorge. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said, trying to sound casual. "That trail looks pretty dangerous for people our age." But Damien had already started, carrying his backpack of safety equipment he wouldn't use to save us. "Come on, Mom," he said, that childhood convincing voice. "It'll only take a few minutes. Besides, Melissa's right. The photos from up there are going to be spectacular." The way he said spectacular made me tremble. They would be spectacular for whoever saw them afterward as evidence of our accident. Henry squeezed my hand. His phone was recording. We had to go. All the way. If we refused, they'd simply find another opportunity, another place. The climb was exhausting. Loose rocks slid under my feet. I nearly fell. But the most terrifying thing was realizing how perfect this place was for a murder. One slip, no survival. No witnesses. "Almost there," Melissa shouted from above. Damien followed, then helped Henry and me up the last few feet. His hands on my arms felt like vulture claws. The lookout was indeed spectacular. The valley, the mountains, the river. In any other circumstance, it would have been a beautiful family moment. But knowing what I knew, it was a nightmare. "Come over here for the photos," Melissa shouted, positioning herself near the edge. "I want the valley in the background." Henry and I approached slowly, each step closer to our final destination. I saw Damien strategically positioning himself behind us, calculating angles, distances. "Perfect," Melissa exclaimed, raising her camera. "Now hug each other and smile." Henry and I hugged, probably for the last time. She took picture after picture. Every flash felt like lightning, announcing the storm. "Take one more," Damien suggested, moving closer. "But this time, stand back a little so the landscape looks better." One step back meant being exactly on the precipice. Henry and I exchanged a look. The time had come. We moved back. We felt the solid ground disappear, only the abyss behind us. Melissa raised the camera again. But this time, I saw something different in her eyes. No need to pretend. The mask had fallen. "Smile," she said, her voice no longer sweet. "This is going to be your last photo." At that moment, Damien lunged. His arms outstretched. The plan was simple: push us, we fall, take photos of the accident, then go down to discover our broken bodies. But Henry was prepared. In the last second, he grabbed Damien's wrist, pulling him forward. "If we're going to die, you're coming with us," he shouted, a fury I'd never seen. For a moment, all four of us teetered, locked in a macabre dance between life and death. Melissa screamed, tried to help Damien, but our combined weight was too much. I felt the ground give way. Gravity took hold. And then, we fell. All four of us, locked in a deadly embrace, screaming as the air whistled and the rocky ground rushed up. In those seconds that lasted an eternity, I thought of Richard, of how he must have felt when Damien pushed him into the gorge 25 years ago. The impact was brutal. I heard bones cracking, my own body shattering against the rocks. The pain was indescribable. But worse was the taste of blood in my mouth, and the certainty that this time, Damien had won. This time, no witnesses. But then, Henry's voice, weak but clear, "Hilda, don't move. Play dead." I realized something incredible. I was still alive. The pain was so intense I thought I'd go mad. Every fiber of my body screamed. Blood ran down my face, something wet and sticky soaked my clothes. But Henry's voice echoed like a divine command. "Play dead." With willpower I didn't know I possessed, I lay completely still, controlling even my breathing. A few feet away, I heard the moans of Damien and Melissa. They had also survived, but from their groans, they seemed worse off. "Melissa," I heard my son's broken voice. "Are you okay?" His concern for his wife made my stomach churn. This man, who murdered his brother and tried to kill us, was still capable of love for someone. "I think I broke my leg," Melissa moaned. "It hurts so much, Damien." "And what about the old people?" The disrespectful way she referred to us confirmed it. We were never family to her, just obstacles. I heard movement, Damien crawling. My heart pounded, I feared he'd hear. "They're dead," he announced after a few minutes that felt like hours. "Both of them have their eyes open, but they're not breathing." His lie filled me with strange hope. If he believed we were dead, we might have a chance. "Perfect," Melissa whispered, satisfaction chilling my blood. "It worked just like we planned." "Well, except the part where we fell, too." I heard her bitter laugh. "At least we won't have to pretend we love them anymore." For the next few minutes, an eternity, Damien and Melissa discussed their situation. Injured, but able to move. The plan, crawl until they found a place to call for help, then tell the story of their miraculous survival. "Remember the story?" Damien said to Melissa. "We were taking pictures when a rock came loose under Dad's feet. He tripped, and trying to grab on, he pulled Mom with him. We tried to help, but we fell, too. It's important our stories match." "I know," Melissa replied. "We've practiced this 100 times. We are the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. Poor us. We lost our dear in-laws in a horrible accident." Her performance was so convincing that if I hadn't lived the truth, I would have believed every word. Gradually, their voices faded as they crawled toward their hope for salvation. When silence finally fell, Henry whispered my name. "Hilda, are you okay?" I answered in the same whisper, alive but terribly injured. "My left leg is broken," he said, his voice choked with pain. "And I think I have a few fractured ribs." "What about you?" I did a mental inventory. A stabbing pain in my right arm. My head throbbed. Something was wrong with my shoulder. But I was alive. "We're bad, but we're alive," I whispered. "But there's no signal down here." That was the terrifying part. Alive, but trapped, injured, no way to communicate. If no one came, we would die here. "Henry," I whispered, "before it's too late, I need you to tell me everything. Everything that really happened the night Richard died." My husband sighed, as if he'd waited 25 years for this moment. "That night," he began, trembling, "Richard came to me in the workshop. He was furious. He had papers, bank statements. He showed me evidence Damien had been stealing from our accounts for months, small amounts, then larger sums. Richard had noticed discrepancies. The physical pain mingled with the emotional as I heard the truth. Richard wanted to confront Damien that same night," Henry continued. "I tried to calm him, to convince him to wait. But he was determined. He said he couldn't sleep knowing his younger brother was stealing from us." "And you followed him?" I asked. "I followed him because I was afraid of what might happen. I knew Richard's temper when he got angry, and I had noticed something strange about Damien lately. A coldness that sent shivers down my spine. When I got to the gorge," Henry continued, "I found them screaming. Richard had the papers, waving them in Damien's face. 'You're a thief,' he yelled. 'You're stealing from our own parents. Damien denied everything. Said Richard was crazy. My heart raced, picturing the scene, my two sons, facing off. What happened next? Henry paused for a long time. Richard told him that if he didn't return the money and confess, he would tell us himself. Damien went berserk. He yelled that Richard had always been the favorite, had always had everything easy, that it was time for things to change. And then Henry's voice broke. Damien pushed Richard. It wasn't an accident. He pushed him with all his strength, deliberately. I saw Richard trying to keep his balance. Saw his arms flailing desperately. But it was too late. Tears streamed down my cheeks, mixing with blood. Why did you never tell me the truth? Because when I got to where Damien was, he was crying, trembling, telling me over and over it had been an accident. He begged me not to tell you. That he couldn't lose you, too. But you knew it was a lie, I murmured. Yes, but he was my son, Hilda, my only surviving son. How could I turn him over to the police? How could I destroy what was left of our family? And the stolen money? Damien promised me he would return it little by little. He swore it had been a bad decision, that he had been desperate, that it would never happen again. But he never returned a single penny. In fact, he kept stealing, and I kept quiet because every day that passed made me more of an accomplice to his crime. Just then, we heard voices in the distance. Damien and Melissa had found help. Soon, rescue teams would be here. Our murderous children would play the role of their lives, traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. The voices grew closer, helicopters overhead. The rescue team. With them came the most crucial moment of our lives. Henry and I had to decide, pretend to be dead until we could reveal the truth, or risk being rescued with our murderers. Hilda, Henry whispered urgently. The phone recorded everything. Melissa's confession. Damien admitting we're obstacles. Everything. But if they find us alive now, they can destroy the evidence before we hand it over. He was right. If Damien and Melissa realized we'd survived and heard their confessions, they'd silence us forever. This time, it wouldn't be an accident. We had to wait for the perfect moment. They're down here. Damien's voice shouted from above. My parents. Please hurry. His performance was perfect, his voice broken with despair. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed him. Sir, stay calm, an authoritative voice replied. We're coming down to evaluate you. You and your wife can move. I heard ropes and equipment. Melissa had perfected her role as grieving widow. I can't believe this happened, she sobbed. We were taking pictures, so happy. It all happened so fast. A rock came loose and they fell. Every word was a stab. She'd repeat those words to the police, the media. Rescuers descended. I heard voices getting closer, boots on rock. They're here, a rescuer shouted, finding us. We have 2 people at the bottom of the gorge. He examined us. I kept my eyes closed, breathing shallowly. This one still has a faint pulse, he announced, referring to Henry. The woman? I'm not sure. I need the medical team down here immediately. My heart raced. The plan was working. They'd believe Henry was near death, but alive. I would be close enough to death not to be an immediate threat. Paramedics worked on us. I felt an oxygen mask, checks on my wounds, being secured to a stretcher. I fought every instinct to open my eyes, ask for help, stop pretending. The man is stable but critical, I heard a paramedic report. The woman is in very serious condition. Pulse almost imperceptible. We need to transport them to the hospital immediately. Perfect. They'd take us to the hospital, where we could talk to authorities without Damien and Melissa silencing us. During the stretcher ascent, I heard Melissa's faint sobs and comforting words offered to her and Damien. You were so brave to survive this, someone told her. It's a miracle you're relatively okay. If only they knew the real miracle was that Henry and I were alive to tell the truth. In the medical helicopter, flying to the hospital, I felt Henry's presence on the stretcher beside mine. Paramedics kept him stable. From their conversations, I understood he was critical. His injuries were more serious than mine. For a terrible moment, I feared he might die before we could reveal the truth. Ma'am, a paramedic said to me, if you can hear me, hold on. We'll be at the hospital in a few minutes. His voice was gentle, filled with genuine compassion, a stark contrast to the falsehoods I'd heard from my own family. At the hospital, chaos. Doctors, nurses, shouting orders. I was taken to an emergency room. I had to keep pretending to be unconscious, but also find a way to communicate with someone I trusted. Doctor, a nurse said, Her vital signs are strange. Her pulse is stronger than we'd expect for someone in her supposed condition. My heart skipped a beat. They'd discovered me. I was such a bad actress, my own body betrayed me. The doctor murmured. It happens in extreme trauma. The body has mysterious ways of clinging to life. Let's keep a close clip, the lady. The next few hours will be crucial. We've done everything we can. Melissa made a sound, supposedly a sob of pain, but it sounded like relief to me. Can we see them? Damien asked. Just for a few minutes, we need to say goodbye, just in case. The doctor agreed. Soon, footsteps approached my bed. This was the most dangerous moment. I had to convince my murderous son I was dying. I felt Damien's presence. His hand touched mine. It took all my willpower not to pull away. Mom, he whispered. If you can hear me, I want you to know that I love you. I'm so sorry this happened. His words were poisoned honey, sweet but deadly. Melissa approached. Hilda, dear, she murmured. You've been like a mother to me. We'll never forget you. Liar. The only reason they wouldn't forget me was because they would have to live with the knowledge they had murdered me. Then Damien leaned closer to my ear. He whispered something that chilled my blood. I hope you've learned your lesson, Mom. You should never have asked so many questions about our finances. Some truths are better left buried, just like Richard. At that moment, I knew our plan had worked. Damien had just confessed. And even though I couldn't record it, a nurse in the room had heard every word. Damien's whisper echoed in my ears, a direct confession. He mentioned Richard. Admitted truths should remain buried. And most importantly, he acknowledged our questions about finances were the reason for our accident. But I needed more. A full confession that couldn't be misinterpreted or denied. The nurse who overheard, a young woman named Enz, froze by the monitoring machine. Through my half-closed eyelids, I saw her eyes widen in surprise and horror. She heard something she shouldn't have, and her expression told me she understood the implications. What did you say about Richard? Melissa whispered, surprised. Damien tensed, realizing he'd said too much. Nothing, he muttered. I just meant, well, Mom always wondered what really happened that night. I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But it did matter. And Melissa was smart enough to realize his mistake. Damien, she said, tense, let's go. The doctors need space to work. I felt the tension between them, the mutual understanding they'd said too much in the wrong place. After they left, Nurse Enz approached my bed. Ma'am, she whispered, so low I barely heard her. I know you can hear me. What I just heard is not normal. If you are in danger, you need to tell me somehow. Her urgency filled me with hope. Someone else suspected. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, I moved my index finger. The smallest movement, but Enz noticed. Oh my God, she whispered. She's pretending to be unconscious. I moved my finger again, twice. Yes, she said, leaning closer. Listen. I'm going to pretend I'm checking your monitors. If you are in danger from those people who were just here, move your finger 3 times. Without hesitation, I moved my finger 3 times. Enz gasped. They did this to you. 3 more movements. The nurse moved away, pretending to check my 4, processing what she discovered. I saw her struggling with the decision. Finally, she approached again. I'm going to talk to the doctor in charge, she whispered. But I need you to keep pretending until we can protect you. Do you understand? I moved my finger once. The next few minutes were agonizing. Enz left. I was alone, praying she'd believe me. Finally, footsteps. It was Enz, an older man, the chief doctor, and surprisingly, 2 police officers. Ma'am, the doctor said softly, Nurse Enz told me about your situation. If you can hear me, we need you to know you are safe now. The officers are here to protect you. A wave of relief so intense nearly broke my act. Can you open your eyes? One officer asked. Slowly, I opened them. The hospital light blinded me, but I focused on their worried faces. Thank God, Enz murmured. I thought I was going crazy. Ma'am, the officer, Detective Johnson, said, I'm Detective Johnson. We understand you may be in a very dangerous situation. Can you tell us what really happened on that mountain? My voice came out as a raspy whisper after hours of pretending. My son and his wife, pushed us. The next few hours were a whirlwind of statements, recordings, revelations. I told Detective Johnson everything, Richard's death, Damien's thefts, the pressure to change our will, and finally, the murder plot on the mountain. Your husband has recorded evidence? The detective asked, his eyes gleaming. Yes, I replied. Everything is on his phone. The confessions, the plans, everything. The detective immediately went to Henry's room. Henry had regained consciousness an hour after me. When the detective explained, Henry handed over his phone without hesitation. Here's everything, he said, his voice weak but firm. 25 years of lies and the truth about what happened today. While police technicians analyzed the recording, Damien and Melissa remained in the waiting room, playing their parts as devastated family members to other hospital visitors. They had no idea their careful performance was about to end forever. The recording is clear, the detective announced an hour later. We have explicit confessions about Richard's murder, admissions about stealing money, and direct evidence of premeditated attempted murder against you both. It's more than enough to arrest them. Are you going to arrest them here? I asked, concerned for our safety. If they realize we're alive and talking. The detective nodded. We already have officers in position. As soon as we have the arrest warrant signed, we'll take them in. In the meantime, you are both under police protection. The irony was not lost on me. Damien and Melissa were downstairs, probably receiving condolences for our deaths, planning our funeral and inheritance. They had no idea that upstairs, in our hospital rooms, we were tearing down their carefully constructed world of lies. Is there anything else? The detective said, pulling out a folder of papers. After hearing your story, we investigated your son's finances. Not only is he bankrupt, as you suspected, but he also owes money to some very dangerous people, unofficial lenders who don't take excuses. My blood ran cold. You mean, we weren't just inconvenient to him? He confirmed it, the detective said. You were his only salvation. With your inheritance, he could pay off his debts and start over. Without you, he would probably be dead in a few weeks. That revelation added a new dimension to the betrayal. He hadn't just seen us as obstacles. He had seen us as his financial lifesaver. Our death wasn't just convenient, it was absolutely necessary for his survival. And what will happen to our grandchildren? I asked, a new wave of pain for Damien and Melissa's innocent children. Social services will take temporary custody, the detective replied gently. But as I understand it, you could apply for custody once you recover. The idea of raising the children of our own murderers was overwhelming. But it was also the only way to ensure something good would come out of this nightmare. Those children were innocent, and deserved a chance to grow up where love was real, not feigned. It's time, the detective announced when an officer entered with papers. The warrants are signed. We're going to arrest them now. Through my room window, overlooking the parking lot, I saw police officers discreetly position themselves. The moment I had waited for 25 years had finally arrived. Damien Black and Melissa Black, I heard the firm voice of the officer in charge. You are under arrest for the murder of Richard Black and the attempted murder of Hilda and Henry Black. The silence was deafening. Then, Melissa's hysterical voice. What are you talking about? We are the victims here. Our in-laws died in an accident. Ma'am, the officer replied calmly, your in-laws are alive, and they have provided complete evidence of your crimes. There was a moment of absolute silence, followed by Damien's desperate scream. That's impossible. We saw them die. They were dead. His involuntary confession was captured by police recorders, adding another piece of evidence. Through the radio, I heard Melissa blame Damien. It was all his idea. I didn't want to do any of this. He forced me. And Damien, in desperation, screamed back, you were the one who suggested the cliff. You planned all of this. In minutes, their alliance fell apart, each trying to save their own skin. Detective Johnson returned to my room an hour later, satisfaction mixed with sadness. They're arrested and on their way to the station, he informed me. They're both trying to blame each other, which only strengthens our case. But there's something else I need to tell you. What else? I asked, unsure my heart could take more revelations. During the arrest, we found this in your son's backpack, he said, showing me a small digital recorder. Apparently, he had been recording his conversations with you and your husband for the past few weeks, probably looking for evidence that you suspected something. My blood ran cold. What does that mean? The detective sighed. It means he knew you were starting to discover the truth. The trip to the mountain wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a direct response to your suspicions. In one of the recordings, you can clearly hear Melissa telling him, we have to act fast before they go to the police. The depth of their planning, the coldness of their calculation, took my breath away. They hadn't just planned to kill us. They had been monitoring our conversations, evaluating the level of danger we posed. We were mice in a maze, and they were the scientists. There's something else, the detective continued, that we found in the investigation of his finances. Your son not only owed money to dangerous lenders, but he had also forged your signature on several documents trying to access your bank accounts. If you had died on that mountain, he would have had immediate access to all your resources. Every new revelation was like another stab. My own son had not only planned my murder, he had been actively stealing from me, forging my signature, violating every principle of family trust. How much money did he steal in total? I asked, though I didn't want to know. About $50,000 over the last 5 years, the detective replied. Small amounts he thought you wouldn't notice, but which, when added up, amount to a significant sum. The money Henry and I had saved over decades, penny by penny, had been financing our son's life of luxury while he plotted our murder. The following days in the hospital were a whirlwind of police interviews, lawyer visits, and calls from news media. The local press titled it, "The Most Horrible Family Betrayal of the Decade." Reporters from all over wanted our story. My sister Harriet arrived, crying, hugging me. "Hilda," she said, "I always knew there was something strange about Damien after Richard's death, but I never imagined this." Her words comforted me, my maternal instincts hadn't been completely blind. And the kids? I asked about my grandchildren, now in temporary custody. "I saw them yesterday," Harriet said sadly. "They're confused, asking why their parents can't come home. They're too young to understand." Our lawyer, Albert, came with news about the legal process. "The case is solid," he assured us. "With the recordings, the confessions during the arrest, and all the financial evidence, it's almost impossible for them to escape significant convictions." But then he added something chilling. "However, they are trying to negotiate a lesser guilty plea by claiming it was a crime of passion, not premeditated." "A crime of passion?" I exclaimed, indignant. "They planned this for weeks, bought special equipment, chose the perfect place." Albert nodded gravely. "I know, and we have evidence of premeditation, but their lawyers will argue it was a desperate decision made under extreme financial pressure." The idea that they could receive reduced sentences for their crimes filled me with fury. They had murdered Richard. They had tried to murder us. They had stolen our money for years. And now they wanted to present themselves as victims of circumstances. What can we do to ensure they get what they deserve? I asked. "Testify," Albert replied simply. "Your testimony combined with all the evidence will be crucial. But I warn you, it's going to be emotionally devastating to face your son in court." He was right. The idea of looking Damien in the eyes, of listening to his lawyers, of publicly reliving this nightmare, was overwhelming. But it was what I had to do. For Richard. For us. And for my grandchildren, who deserve the truth about their parents. 3 weeks after the arrest, Henry and I finally went home. Our wounds had healed enough, though he still needed crutches, and my arm was in a sling. The house felt strange, like a stage after the actors have left. Everything was as we'd left it, breakfast dishes in the sink, the bed unmade, the flowers Damien had brought me that week, now withered and dead on the kitchen table. It was as if time had stopped the moment our normal lives ended forever. "Do you think we'll ever be happy again?" I asked Henry that first night back, in our familiar bed. He hugged me with his uninjured arm. "I don't know, Hilda," he said. "But we're alive. We have the truth on our side. And for the first time in 25 years, we don't have to live with secrets." The trial began 6 months later. The day I testified, I looked Damien directly in the eyes. For the first time since his arrest. I saw no remorse, no pain. I didn't see the son I had raised. I saw a cold, calculating stranger who had disguised himself as my son for decades. When I finished my testimony, after recounting every horrible detail, I addressed him directly from the witness stand. "Damien," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul, "I don't know who you are, but you are no longer my son. My son died the night you killed Richard. And what has been living in his place for 25 years is a monster that I unwittingly helped raise." The jury deliberated for 3 days. They found Damien guilty of first-degree murder for Richard's death, and first-degree attempted murder for what he did to us. Melissa received the same conviction as an accomplice. Both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, 1 year later, Henry and I have begun the process of formally adopting our grandchildren. They are beautiful, innocent children who deserve a chance to grow up knowing what true love is, not the manipulative, toxic version they received from their biological parents. Every night, when I tuck them in, I tell them about their Uncle Richard, the brother they never knew. I tell them about his kindness, his honesty, his dream of being an uncle. And as this story settles in your mind, remember this: the human heart holds unimaginable depths, capable of both the purest love and the most chilling betrayal. Life has taught me that sometimes, the monsters aren't hiding under your bed, they're sitting across from you at the dinner table. But even in the deepest darkness, there is a fierce light that demands truth, demands justice, and ultimately, demands love. We survived. We fought. And we are rebuilding. Because some stories, no matter how painful, refuse to stay buried. They demand to be heard.